welcome to the podcast Eat Better Food Today. I'm your host, Ken Coonahan, and I'm excited to be sharing insights on why we believe that health and longevity begins with the food we eat. The goal of this podcast will be to inspire, educate, and enable folks to live a healthier life and do it affordably. My wife and I have been on this journey for over 10 years, with the help of the Cleveland Clinic, by the way, and continue to work on it every day. A percentage of the profits from this podcast will be put towards child hunger, with an initial focus on the poorest suburb in America, East Cleveland, Ohio. On this episode, we are grateful to have Dr. Elizabeth Bradley. Dr. Bradley is currently the medical director of the Advanced Functional Medicine and Longevity Center and a medical consultant at the Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center. Dr. Bradley was the director of the Center for Functional Medicine at the Cleveland Clinic, which is where we met several years ago over Zoom. With a Master of Science in Nutrition and as a registered dietitian, Dr. Bradley started her career as a clinical nutritionist at Massachusetts General Hospital. My son calls that, by the way, the Crystal Palace, which is kind of interesting. He works in Boston at Boston Medical Center, where she practiced for 6 years. Wanting to do more to help patients, she went on to pursue a medical degree at Dartmouth Medical School. After practicing internal medicine for more than 20 years, she decided to study functional medicine and become a fully certified functional medicine physician in 2015. Dr. Bradley, as I mentioned, was my functional medicine doctor post-COVID while she was at the Cleveland Clinic, so we've always communicated virtually like this. In this episode, we'll explore Dr. Bradley's thoughts on food, health, and longevity and discuss what continues to inspire her after her long career as a medical professional.
Thank you so much, Ken.
Welcome, Dr. Bradley. So to get started, I told you I'd kind of have like an icebreaker question. So I usually ask everybody what they had for breakfast.
Well, I haven't eaten yet. There's probably part of this intermittent fasting, but it was ironic because last night we had a big Christmas employee dinner, and there were leftovers, and I said, "Can I take the salmon?" And they're like, "Sure." And it's like, "Why?" I'm like, "Well, that's going to be my breakfast." So ironically, I'm probably the Swedish inheritance in me, but I always tend to love having, believe it or not, salmon for breakfast. My husband just he turns his head the other way. Yeah.
Nice. I don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll eat salmon anytime.
So it's waiting for me after this.
Got it. I've been to the gym, had my morning shake, nice. And I'm ready to go. So in conversations, kind of as you go through the functional medicine program at the Cleveland Clinic, there's a lot of conversation about when you talk to a dietitian there about the home pantry. So if we went to your home in New Hampshire, Connecticut, or when you were in Cleveland, what would we find in your
Not
pantry?
A lot, to tell you the truth. So right now, there'll be onions, there'll be sesame oil. I'm envisioning it as we speak. I have, what else is in there? Cassava flour, which my husband told me don't ever buy that again. I have these pepitos, like the little pumpkin seeds. Chia seeds are in there. Yeah. Oatmeal. I have there's like whole oats in there. What else is in there? It's funny because I'm going to be doing a detox group with some patients up in New Hampshire. So I just actually bought this detox shake, and it has like the protein powder and whatnot. And sometimes, and I'm going to use it as a demo because when you're really busy and you don't have time to make like a shake like you probably did this morning. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I would use this, and it tastes great, and it has a lot of nutrients in it that support phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification. And it actually tastes good, okay. So it's not a bad thing. So actually, that just came in the mail. Let's see, I have some almond butter. I don't have a lot in there. There may be some. I think there's some tomatoes that are over there that we're letting ripen, and then not in the pantry, but other places. The olive oil and other things, and spices are in another the area of our house, because we were traveling.
So it's a pretty clean pantry?
Relatively clean, except I have to back up. I just added from my daughter. She wanted to make Christmas cookies for her roommates. So she brought flour, sugar, and these like little things to put on the cookies. So those are sitting in, because she's like, I don't want to take that home. She didn't want to take it home. So they're in my cupboard right now, but that's as a default. Yeah. So it is actually pretty clean. And
nice.
We try to overall like keep sugar, sweets, anything that's really highly processed out of the house, because you'll eat it. That's the one thing you don't want to have, in a weak moment. There's almond crackers. That's the one thing that's probably the most processed food that we have in the cupboard right now in the pantry. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, it kind of sounds similar. I have a little bit more stock in my pantry.
Yeah, and you know what? It takes a while, doesn't it, to get rid of things that you don't need. And actually, this is what's going to be part of this detox group we're going to talk about, is how to offload the things that you really don't want to have overall. And then what do you need to bring back into your pantry to make it a clean pantry, and also make it so that the choices you have, especially if you have a weak moment, it's not going to be, eating something that you don't really want overall.
Yeah, when we have a weak moment, we have some dark chocolate.
And you know what? I'm
pantry.
Don't have any right now, and I need to buy some. I love dark chocolate. Yeah, I agree with you.
So why don't we so the pantry question was kind of a lead-in, I guess, for our listeners. Can you define what functional medicine is?
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of people, they don't really know functional medicine unless you are in the inner circle and you've been introduced to it. So I look at it as looking at sort of the root cause of chronic disease and trying to find a balance in your function, and a healthy balance via nutrition, food. We would replace supplements in nutrients if we found that you were deficient or insufficient in these nutrients. And then also looking at mind-body medicine, looking at environmental factors, genetic factors, and other things that can influence your health long-term. So it's really getting to the root cause of why you are in this particular quote-unquote medical state. And it could be if someone has diabetes or hypertension, or if they have GI concerns, autoimmune conditions. There's so many different areas within medicine that we use the functional medicine approach to try to create balance so that you're feeling the best that you can.
And why would you say that's good for longevity, taking that approach versus, if you think of the standard pantry?
It's funny you said that, because a lot of times, not intentionally, but I see what people are buying at the grocery store, and you look what's in the basket, and there's sometimes it just amazes me at the amount of sugar, saturated fat, processed foods that they're having. And there's a new term that we think about. You think about lifespan, and we talk about health span. And what you really want is a healthy, long life that, as long as you can, be the best that you can be in terms of your health. So when we think about longevity, we're thinking more about your health span, like how long can you live being healthy? And we always ask patients is, what is it that you want to do in your life that is going to motivate you to want to stay healthy and to continue to eat healthy food and whatnot. And so often there'll be basic questions like, I want to be able to get on the floor with my grandchildren and be able to play with them and be able to do this, or I want to travel. It's funny because we were just in Rome, and the one day we walked like 16,000 steps, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, and these were real steps, like, like the Spanish steps that you're actually climbing up, and you realize that, boy, you really do want to stay in shape, because I want to travel and I want to continue to travel and be able to do that beyond my present age. So with longevity, you want to be able to live the fullest that you can until you aren't here anymore. Because we all know that there's an end point. We don't know when. But you want to be able to not be 80 years old and unable to walk or unable to enjoy the things that you want to enjoy in life.
Yeah, I've made the comment to a couple of people. I think I've even made it to you, but I want to live to be 120. And they say, well, why would you want to live to be 120? You'll be like a cripple. And it's like, no, I want to live to be a healthy 120, not just.
And it's interesting that they're finding that more and more, even our children, well, minus COVID, but our children, our longevity and whatnot, they're going to be able to hopefully live beyond 100. Whereas for years it was 76, or 72 for men. So I'm really excited for, what do I tell my husband? I said, I have another 30, 40 years I'm going to live. So I have like a whole nother career ahead of me.
Exactly. That's the way I look at it too. So kind of given the longevity, the functional medicine, can you share with us a little bit about, I hear a lot about food as medicine in conversations. I've read some things that you've talked about as well. So how would you say food, because it's kind of like, there's a lot of conversation, environmental conversations, the air you breathe, you want to have healthy air and so forth. But okay, so you're putting that into your body every time you breathe, but you're putting food into your body every day. So how would you kind of talk about food as medicine and how
we never think about food as intelligent information that, having studied so much biochemistry, I understand the real detail of new specific molecules, believe it or not, in food that create signaling for cells in our body at a very, biochemical level. Because we think about food, does it taste good, cultural, society, what's available, and what makes you feel good. So it's such a different basis in terms of what a typical, I think, person would think about food. And sometimes they don't even think about it. It's whatever's in front of them, they eat, and then they just move on. They don't think about, and I love this. There's a couple of great books that I have read, and one of them, it was talking about taking garlic and cooking it in olive oil. And it actually releases the nutrients within the garlic that actually makes it more powerful in terms of what it's going to do in our body. And in particular, this was related to cancer and prostate cancer. And we don't think about that. You're in Italy and they cook with olive oil and garlic and they add it to food. And it's just something that culturally, and it amazes me that different cultures, believe it or not, have maybe not thinking about it, but have figured out how they can balance food and nutritionally. You've heard of the blue zones. And it's so fascinating looking at the different areas and what was available to them. Like in Okinawa, it was the yams and the sweet potatoes, and they ate a lot of those. That was their root vegetable. But once again, it wasn't processed. It was whole food. And you think about the nutrition that's within it, it's a very similar nutrition that you might find in another vegetable, but it just so happened that was theirs. And that the antioxidants that were in that particular food item is extremely high. And so we know that that's going to have an incredible impact on their health, in particular cancer. And we think about, Peter Attia talks about the 4 horsemen and his new book, Outlive. And I love what he thinks about this, because this is what we think about in medicine, is the chronic diseases that you want to stave off, your cardiovascular, your neurodegenerative, cancer, your metabolic. So those are like the 4 major areas that what can we do as an individual. And you look at your own genetics, but that doesn't tell everything, because environment we know, and in particular, how you live your life and what you eat has an impact on the development of these chronic diseases. So anyway, so you look at the different areas with the blue zones, and you realize that the people, besides food, it was also their position in society and their relationships and family. That was really interesting looking at that, because we know the impact that has, and feeling belongingness and feeling a purpose in life, I think is critical to, once again, part of this whole longevity thing.
Right, it's food with kind of all those other factors that you mentioned to kind of,
And you know what
absolutely
is amazing is there's a lot of individuals who do not know how to cook. And when I would ask patients, like, what do you, how do you cook your meals? I open the box and I put it in the microwave. And it just really, because I'm from a family that cooked. My mother cooked a lot, and then I love to cook myself. And having been in nutrition, you learn everything about the science of food besides the biochemistry within the body. And it really is amazing that Google had to have cooking lessons for their 20-something-year-old employees because none of them knew how to cook. And they actually had a teaching kitchen within Google to teach people how to saute or how to steam or how to stir fry. It was really fascinating that I think we need to teach more and more individuals. And there are a lot of people who are affluent who also don't know how to cook because they just do takeout or they eat out all the time. It's really interesting. Getting back to basics, I think we really need to. Something very simple, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I had all my kids, so I have 3 kids, and they all learned how to cook because I like to cook. But I also took them to my grandmother and had her, some of her recipes, just sit down and watch her and how she made different things because she was the best by far.
Oh, isn't it? You learn from family.
So you learn. The problem with my grandmother was, though, she did everything by feel. So I sent my daughter there. I said, write everything down so we know how she makes stuff. And she's like, she just does it by feel. She just, keeps adding different things, tasting it. She must taste. I forget how many times she tastes.
It's funny. I tend to cook the same way. I mean, I do follow a few recipes, but then I mock it up. I change it. I add my own little signature to it. It's funny. Yeah. That's great.
So this center we're trying to create in East Cleveland, we are going to have like cooking classes there, but I've also learned that in that neighborhood, not everybody has the utensils to cook with. So not only learning how to cook, but then also we're going to have to kind of figure out, okay, I only have a microwave. What can you either teach them with a microwave or provide maybe some other tools?
And you can do so many things, believe it or not, with even a microwave that's healthy. Like, you could steam your broccoli in the microwave. And or they can get like a single little burner, like one burner. You just need one burner and a microwave and you can do like fascinating stuff. Yeah. That's good. Where is this going to be in East Cleveland?
So it's going to be on Euclid Ave, right at Eddy and Euclid Ave there. So it's basically part of the church that I belong to. So we're trying to set up a East Side center right where our parish is. We've got a nice new young priest. He's very excited about it. We got the bishops endorsed it. So now we're after funding.
You might want to contact the Daniel Plan. Have you heard of that?
I've heard of
it. The Center for Functional Medicine supports the Daniel Plan, and we had been doing it for years. And it was based in churches, believe it or not, and it was providing the education of functional medicine to the parishioners, the people that are part of the church. Part of the Daniel Plan also included biometrics and whatnot. And I don't know if they're doing that part now, but who knows? You might be able to have some of the nutritionists come in and either donate some of their time or any of the other practitioners that are there. I wish I was still there. I would definitely join forces with you. Yeah.
Oh, all right. I'll look into that. Yeah. So I guess help us because, I think you and I know, but so whole foods versus ultra-processed foods, what are they? Something I read recent, I guess I'll give you 2 data points that I've learned. One is that 70% right now of the American diet consists of ultra-processed foods, which is not good. And then 2, like the blue zones that you mentioned, like Loma Linda, California is one of the blue zones. They started getting fast food and like some of the convenience stores in that neighborhood, and now people are starting to gain weight in that neighborhood because they're getting exposed to basically ultra-processed foods.
So yeah.
Maybe help us understand the difference between the two.
That's a good question. So you think about a whole food. I always do the analogy of like an apple or a potato is a whole food. And then you can convert it into something else. I love this, like Apple Jacks. Is that really like from an apple? Or potato chips are considered an ultra-processed, or even French fries, ultra-processed food. And they take the actual food item and convert it, and it actually changes how the body processes it, but adds fat, salt, and like a potato, for example, is a starch and it's a carbohydrate. But when you put it in a potato chip form, it actually is almost like taking sugar, because it raises your blood sugar exponentially when you just take the potato chip alone. And they did this great study where they were trying to figure out, like, we use the term macros. That's your protein, fat, and carbohydrate. And they took two different groups, and one was provided the same protein, fat, and carbohydrate, salt, sodium, fiber, whatnot, in a meal. And then they had another group that was highly processed. So it's the same macros, but the food was converted into highly processed foods. And what they looked at was that the group that had the highly processed foods, they were the group that actually gained weight. And part of it was related to the fact that they could eat more of it, of the actual food, or they ate more of the actual food. But the way it actually converted into glucose, which then triggers insulin, which is like a pro-growth hormone, that then put on more body weight. So it's fascinating, because so many people are wondering, why is obesity such a huge component of our society? But you see where, it's so sad, you see where our fast food restaurants have gone into all these different countries. And take like China, for example. One of the first fast food companies was KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken, and the kids loved to go there because they would go there after school and they would actually do their homework, but they were also eating a lot of the quote unquote fried foods and the chicken and whatnot. And China never used to have an issue with obesity, but now fast forward, they now have adopted a lot of Western societies' eating habits. It's so sad when I think about it, because we're bringing the worst thing to these countries. And there's an interesting take on food manufacturing, because they have figured out the quote-unquote reward center in our brain, which is addictive. And they have figured out through MRIs the right ratio of protein, like sugar and salt, to create an addictive food. And I'm not going to come up with anything, but Doritos is a perfect example. And so they would see that the reward center in our brain would actually light up from certain foods. And that's how they figured out to develop the food in the ratio that would want us to eat more and more and more of it. So we're undoing ourselves. It really is amazing when you think about what's going on behind the scenes. But anyway, and then there was another great, almost like a scatter plot, where they took different towns and cities, small towns, large towns. There was this one that was in Maine in particular. And they put the little push pins on a map of all the different not even fast food, convenience stores where you could get something like a Coca-Cola soda or a fast, like chips or whatever. And the map was all red, because that's where you could get it. Every other block, these particular foods. But if you were to try to put the same thing on whole food, apples, bananas, broccoli, salads, they were far and few in between. So unfortunately, the environment is fostering easy access, and sometimes it could be cheaper. It could be, especially when they, supersize things, they supersize your Slurpee or all these other stuff. that people feel like they're getting more, and unfortunately, they don't realize the impact that it's having metabolically on their body.
Well, maybe if you can share with me, I'll put them as links to the podcast with a couple of studies, the main study and the kind of when you talk
processed
about
food.
The one a regular meal.
Yeah, that was Dr. Hall. Yeah, I'll pull that up for you.
That would be helpful. Okay. I interviewed a chef that a couple of weeks ago that he basically feeds the Cleveland Cavaliers. And if you think about what's coming up on Christmas Day, we have basketball, we have, I think, college football, we have professional football. And you think about the commercials. I mean, I love sports, but you think of the commercials, it's all fast food. 100% is fast food. So he said his goal is to get one of these star players from the basketball team. They all eat healthy. I mean, they couldn't perform on the court. They didn't eat healthy. But they also promote some of these ultra-processed foods. So his goal is to get them to start saying, hey, a carrot or broccoli or some of these whole foods are good for you versus just
fast food.
Promoting.
Oh, interesting. That's wonderful to see that. So. Because to tell you the truth, if you would ask Tom Brady what he ate when he was like in his full, he ate extremely healthy and was extremely rigid, and that's how they perform, right? That's how the best that they could perform. And I think ourselves, like when we, if you tend to not eat the foods that are quote unquote healthy for you, that you typically eat, you actually feel horrible. Your body, talks to you and it'll tell you. My patients didn't understand this when we would start some of our groups, and the big thing was like arthritis, and they would have pain in their knees. Even without losing any body weight, just changing the food that they were eating, they would come back in after 2 weeks and they said, oh my goodness, the pain in my knees are gone. Like they didn't realize that the food that they were eating was causing inflammation that was causing pain. And then when they started losing weight, because that was part of their goal, that there's, we call it a 4 to 1 ratio of pounds to pressure, like on your knees. So for every pound you lose, it's 4 pounds of pressure less. So if you lose 10 pounds, that's 40 pounds of pressure less on your knees. So no wonder you feel better. Wow. And people, if they understand the science behind some of this, they would be, I think, more motivated to understand that making these changes can actually have a huge impact on their life. Yeah. Yeah. And the same thing, it's funny, it kind of goes hand in hand. So if you lose the weight, okay, so the pressure in the knees get less. Oh, your back pain's less. Oh, your feet don't hurt. It's like, once again, it's like the trickle down effect in terms of how it impacts our whole life. Yeah. Oh, it is.
It's a pretty significant ratio. I mean, as far weight to the stress on your body.
And it doesn't and they even say like losing 5% of your body weight has significant impact on your life long term. So it doesn't have to be like some people think like, oh my goodness, there's no way I can lose 50 pounds, 100 pounds. But even 5%, which is not a huge amount, can have significant impact on your health and cardiovascular and metabolic.
Interesting.
Isn't it?
That's achievable by everybody.
Yeah, and that should be a goal that people. We always tell someone like, don't try to go for the 100-pound weight loss. Start with the achievable, like you had said, and something that you can actually you can see it happening and work on. And then if you want to do more, great. But just start with that. Start with something very simple, actually.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about a recipe at the end here, but I'm just trying to get, if you can make one meal at home that's healthy, that takes you 30 minutes. That's all. It just start there. I mean, that would be progress, and that would help with kind of
and so sometimes even myself, when I feel like I'm really busy and I don't have time to cook a meal, then I'm realizing, okay, how long does it really take? I've done these little games with myself. There was one day when my children were younger and I was working like 60 hours a week and the dishes had to come out of the dishwasher. And I sat there thinking, I don't have time for this. And then I said, okay, how much time does it actually take? So fast forward less than 2 minutes to take, and I said, you have 2 minutes. And I started to frame a lot of things in my life that way, because a lot of times you think you don't have time, but when you actually realize how much time you waste on the computer, on your cell phone, thinking about not doing something, you could have already had it done. Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh my goodness.
So kind of given because you've got an interesting background on the fact you study nutrition, you were a doctor, and then the functional medicine path. So what would you say you learned or maybe didn't learn on your journey kind of through you were at Cornell, Tufts, Dartmouth, obviously at the Cleveland Clinic, because it's a different, in doctors that I've talked to, it's kind of a different philosophy or approach or process. I don't know quite the words to use there, from kind of functional medicine versus
standard medicine. Yeah, it's interesting because I've been doing this a long time. So first with nutrition, and it's different now than it was back then. But what has stayed the same are the basic. When we had talked earlier about the biochemistry in the body, we know more about how food is absorbed and broken down. We know so much more now. And we also know more about how your gut, and I'm going to use the word microbiome, which is the basic bacteria in colon, but how the gut microbiome communicates and how the gut communicates with the brain. Like, we didn't know that years ago. Actually, the brain was such an unknown organ in our whole body for years, until like the last 20 years. But so what I found is that functional medicine, I always use it as adjunctive to conventional medicine. They're not exclusive of one another, because you have to understand what's going on in the body. And sometimes functional medicine is not the treatment that should be for someone, or you can add on to standard treatment that they're getting, because we do know that there's specific things within conventional medicine that do work and that people should be following. Likewise, there's another really interesting position where people are like, well, what's the difference between functional medicine and integrative medicine? Because and also there's a new area of lifestyle medicine that has come in to our normal standard medicine. So people are like, well, tell me, how does this all fit? And I love to use a Venn diagram where there's an intersection of all three. And in the center, it's lifestyle tends to be the common denominator, where we all work on sleep, exercise, stress management, relationships. But then there's some diversion points where nutrition tends to come in a little bit differently. So your integrative practitioner tends to focus mostly on just the Mediterranean diet, that's where most of the studies have been done. And they actually is a very healthy diet. Lifestyle medicine tends to be more like plant-based. They want to have more vegetarian style, but they understand Mediterranean is also healthy. And then functional medicine uses nutrition as a therapeutic intervention. So you may have someone on a low, we call it a FODMAP diet, if they have concerns with like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or we call it like you could have IBS, either diarrhea or constipation. That could be helpful for that. But we may have somebody also on a cardiometabolic diet, or I might put someone on a keto diet, or I may put someone on similar to the Mediterranean diet. So it's more specific. And actually also we tend to look at things like food sensitivities, and where people may not be able to tolerate certain foods. So there would be a very specific meal plan based on their presenting symptoms, but also through specific testing that we do. So this is where there's sort of a difference between those groups. And I think nutrition is the more significant difference between all of them. Yeah. So.
Well, and kind of to your point, you have to have, and I've got this as a disclaimer for my podcast, you need to consult. I mean, there are a lot of podcasts out there that talk about health and longevity, and so a lot of people will try a keto diet or a vegetarian. So everybody's trying different things, but you need to understand as an individual what is kind of best for you. I mean, when my wife went through the testing at the clinic, she found out one of the reasons she didn't feel good was because of gluten. So she had to cut gluten out of her diet, but she didn't know that prior. She could have tried 6 different diets until you did the testing to kind of identify that. You don't know. So you need to consult with a medical professional, get some blood work done, kind of understand who you are versus, It's
funny because there's a big push for like vegan diets. And I have a lot of young patients in their 20s and 30s that think that this is the way to go. Part of it is not political, but their own belief system. But part of it is they think that this is how they should be eating. And so many of these vegan individuals, I call it a dirty vegan, meaning versus clean vegan, and that they would look at this delicious cookie and it's vegan, so I'm going to have this and I'm not going to eat something else instead. And they end up actually being nutritionally insufficient in so many nutrients. In particular, protein is the big one. And then, B12, because you need to get that from animal products. And so I'm finding that they don't feel great, even though initially they do, because they probably have gotten some of the big junk out of their diet when they go vegan. But then if they're not really conscientious about how they're combining their nutrients, like, years ago, I don't know if you ever heard of the book Diet for a Small Planet. That was the big vegetarian book way back when, that taught people how to combine your food products to create a complete protein. So your egg is a complete protein because there's all your essential amino acids in there. So they would learn to do, hence why bread and peanut butter, for example, a legume and a grain, you put them together and they give you more of a complete protein. And the rice and the beans, even though this is not necessarily, you can make it healthier, but that was another example of how you can put 2 food products together to give you a complete protein. And I think we've gotten away from learning how to do that. Or if someone's a vegetarian, they tend to just, everything has cheese on it. Everything has cheese because they said that that's okay to have. Not understanding some of the nutritional implications of what they're having.
Yeah, and I think to your point, protein is a big, especially as you get older, a big thing that your body, whether you get it through tofu or beans or whatever, but you need to make sure you're getting enough, versus an animal product.
Absolutely. And we tend to, as you said, a lot of people are not cooking, so they're not making some of their protein that you need. At least, I usually tell patients at least 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight that you should strive for. So it almost equals like 3 to 4 ounces for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for most individuals, and trying to figure out how to get that in. Yeah, it's meal planning is, I think that I've had some patients do this, which I love it. Like on the weekend, they do all of their food prep for the week, so that they get everything organized and that they can have the food, especially if you're working. It's hard you're tired, you come home, you just want to you're hungry, you're tired, hungry, and you just want to eat something quickly. But if you do some of the work ahead of time, it makes it easier. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So how about, can you share, without obviously naming any names, but a story or two from your time at the Cleveland Clinic about just a patient that maybe came in with a certain condition, went through the program over a period of time, and
I have a lot, but
better.
One that comes to mind because it just brings joy. It was a patient who had infertility, and I'm seeing this more and more, that couples, women, whomever is waiting till their 30s, if not longer. And then all of a sudden they realize that they're not able to, conceive. So this particular patient, it turned out that we worked on, part of it was on her body weight, because we know insulin has an impact on conceiving. We found out that she actually was very low level hypothyroid. So we were able to help with that. Stress. So there's something called the HPA axis, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal gland, HPA axis, where stress impacts all of your hormones in your body. And the stress affects the release of the master, quote unquote, hormone from the brain, the hypothalamus, to the pituitary gland, that then talks to your thyroid, talks to your adrenal glands, and talks to your female male hormones. Kind of goes trickle down effect like that. And we did some specialized functional medicine testing and found that her levels were extremely high of cortisol, which is the major hormone coming from your adrenal glands. And it's a stress hormone. You need it. You need cortisol. You can't live without it. But when it's constantly being released and it's high, that has there's a great word I love in our world. We call it cortisol steal. So your body will defend itself to produce cortisol at the expense of your other hormones, in particular your estrogen and your testosterone and your hormones and progesterone, things that you need to have a successful pregnancy. So we worked really hard on this part, meditation, and she made some job changes. We worked on her nutrition. And with her, she was going to an infertility specialist, and she actually was having IVF, and they were failing. And it's extremely expensive. So fast forward, it must have been at least 9 months to 10 months. I get a wonderful email, I'm pregnant. And fast forward, she had a wonderful pregnancy and a baby. It just brought me joy, because that's something, a huge impact you can make on someone's life. And she had to work hard. And she kept on saying, but I'm doing everything. I'm like, no, you have to do more. And that was hard for her to think, how much more can I do? Well, you're going to meditate more. You're going to do restorative exercise that's going to help with your adrenal glands, like yoga. And it worked. It was like one of those. This has happened multiple times. Actually, I've had multiple patients, similar but different story, and we were able to get them to the point where they actually were able to conceive and have and this one other patient was not even with IVF. She did it. It was great. Anyway, yeah. It was beautiful. And then we worked with them. Nice. Happy ending. We worked with them also and with our nutritionists during their pregnancy, so that they had the best outcome, and that your baby is going to be there's that term we use, epigenetics. So what I'm doing is going to have an impact on our children. And so there's a great book called Real Food by Lily Nichols, and it's all about what to eat when you are pregnant, and even before. We forget that we actually have to make ourselves the healthiest even before we even want to conceive or whatnot, so that our body is the healthiest. Because think about when we're having a baby, all of the nutrition goes to your baby and the fetus, so that you want to make sure that your body is the healthiest before, so that you have less impact long term. Yeah. Oh, it's wonderful. I love it. I love it. My nieces, I've told everyone to get it. Yeah. Lily, Lily. Lily, yeah.
Lily, got it. Okay.
Christmas
present
that would be
to
nice.
My daughter, so I think that'll be.
I love books, actually.
So you kind of mentioned a couple studies which we'll post to Dr. Hall one, and you talked about Maine, but because I have conversations with people about kind of what my wife and I have been doing for the last 10 years plus with functional medicine. It's like, well, yeah, but there's really no research. There's no evidence. It's take a pill. You don't need to go through this functional medicine.
I find people, patients, individuals, we tend to be the path of least resistance. A pill is easier than having to change your diet. So we were doing a great study at the clinic. Part of the reason why our whole center was developed was to prove the model works, because there's not a lot of research that uses the term functional medicine in the article. But what people don't understand is that the recommendations that we are providing are based on other studies. For example, vitamin D, and how much vitamin D should we take, and how it can impact certain conditions. There's a lot of research on that. And so we would take that particular research and use that into the principles of functional medicine. So we started this one study that was literally taking type 2 diabetics that were on long-acting insulin as part of their regimen. And the goal of the study was to get them off of insulin. And even myself, like I came into this study when it was already underway. I even felt at some point, whoa, that's pretty ambitious. Because once someone's on insulin, it's hard to get someone off. And what's even harder is it was randomized, so that you're putting patients who don't really want to do functional medicine, making them do functional medicine. And then ironically, there were those that really wanted to do functional medicine were put into the other group. So you're taking somebody who, and I this is a big difference I have found with conventional medicine versus my functional medicine patients. They are so highly motivated that they will do everything to make a change because they don't feel well. And they actually put the time and energy into this, and they actually come out feeling better. And it takes that level of motivation. So back to the patients that have type 2 diabetes, I was so pleasantly surprised that we actually were able to get patients off of insulin. And I would never have thought that in my whole career as an internist. And it was a combination of not only changing the diet and the exercise, but also specific supplements that actually help the metabolic component of glucose and what glucose does in the body and what insulin does in the body. And these patients were extremely motivated, the ones that were able to get to that point. So and that to me is exciting. There's continuing to be studies that are being published. We did a bunch that were related to, excuse me. I think you heard of I might have to get water. Okay, I'll be right back.
You can get water. We can edit this, right, Zach? Okay. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, I always have water in the room when we're doing it live, but it does, yeah. Thanks.
Oh, sorry. Wow.
We'll do a little edit.
Let me just take another sip for you.
Yeah, I was telling Zach, we do these live, and I have the guests in the studio.
Oh, yeah. It's amazing, like, when you talk for an hour. Okay, so we're talking about studies, and so we have this wonderful group, Functioning for Life, which is a 10-week functional medicine group environment, and they actually did 2 studies. One was comparing functional medicine, the group, to like a standard patient in the clinic, and they improved in terms of their blood pressure, their weight. Actually, we call it the PROMIS score, and these are patient-reported outcomes in terms of their general feeling, the general health, and mental health. They all improved. But then we did it to ourselves. So we compared our group to our one-on-one in functional medicine. And once again, the patients in the group did better. And part of it is the support, the group effort. And I cannot tell you, I've led so many of these groups, and it's just wonderful to see having, maybe more so even during COVID, but having a supportive environment. And it was intense because it was every week. So it was either 1 hour or 2 hours every week for 10 weeks. And I've had some patients that they just keep doing the groups because they want to be part of a bigger, not necessarily a movement, but with like-minded individuals, because they were given the support with the functional medicine, but also they were seeing other individuals were kind of going through similar things that they were going through, because the groups were based on similar diagnoses. So there would be like a diabetic group or an autoimmune group or a GI group, people that had concerns and medically in those areas, that they may have been isolated and they were the only person that they knew that had that condition. So being part of this was extremely important. And then they learned all the different tools and support, because we had nutritionists, health coaches, and the provider with these patients. And I think about it, I said, well, how often do you get to have your provider for 2 hours? And you can ask any question, you can be there, part of it. And it really, I found it was, it still is a wonderful way of reaching more people, but also making them better. So there's definitely some studies that our center has produced with these groups. You'll have to look at that.
Yeah, I can look at the functional medicine website. I didn't realize the group effect versus we've always done the individual. I've never really, we've never done
But I have to say there are some people that also don't like being in groups. You know, they're more private. So you definitely have to be willing to share. As we talk about, like in the GI group, we talk about your bowels and we talk about, how often you're stooling and whatnot. And some people are like, no, that's not for me. I'm not going to talk about that. too personal.
It's a little too.
Yeah, exactly.
Keep that private.
And I understand.
Yeah. So how about just a couple more questions, and I'll ask you about the recipe. But so you talked about travel, you talked about China, you said you're in Rome. Any obs? So my wife and I travel as well, and I think we've had this conversation before. But when we're overseas in Europe, my wife can eat anything. When she's here in the U.S., she can't eat anything. She's got the gluten issue, and I've got my own theories about that. But I guess any thoughts from your travels, I guess, about
sure. Or even from what I cook. So we went to Rome, and the reason why we actually went to Rome is my husband and I were December babies, and our birthdays are 10 days apart. So we decided we're going to go to Rome to celebrate our birthdays, and so that was really fun. So here I'm in Rome, and I'm like, of course I'm going to eat pasta. How could I not? And I tried to avoid it. As a matter of fact, I wore a continuous glucose monitor for a month. I was beta testing and levels. This is a particular type of glucose monitor. And I just found that if I had pasta, my glucose went super high. And it just went, okay, this is not good. Granted, if I changed it from our regular pasta to like a lentil pasta, then it didn't have that effect. So here I'm in Italy, and they don't have lentil pasta. So the first night, my husband's like, okay, we're going to get pasta carbonara. That's the Rome dish, the Rome pasta dish. So I'm like, okay, here we go. So first of all, they don't give you a huge portion. It was like a small little, and we were splitting this. And it was, when we talk about al dente, it was major al dente, to the point where I'm like chewing it going, I don't think I've ever had pasta this quote unquote raw in my mind, ever. And so then I started really thinking about it, and I said, and doing a little bit more research, that the pasta, it's so kind of similar to like a really ripe banana and an unripe banana. The carbohydrate starch changes based on like how much either you cook it or how ripe it is. So the same thing with pasta is the more al dente it is, it actually has different carbohydrate impact in the body where it doesn't increase the glucose. So I started looking, going, okay, so they're not increasing their glucose, and the insulin is not being pushed up, which puts on obviously body weight. But the portions were less, and it's a different type of wheat. It's not the same wheat, and I know. And I said, how do we get this here in America? And then, of course, this was a city, but people walk. They walk everywhere, and so hence, after one day of doing 16,000 steps, I'm like, yeah, but you know what? They walk off, and they also do tend to eat. At least in Rome, they tend to eat their major meal at the noon, 1 o'clock time, 2 o'clock. And then at nighttime, they just have, of course, I'm watching everybody eating, but they have just a very thin pizza with, they'll have arugula on it and a egg cooked on it. That's their dinner, and that's it. They don't have anything else. So I'm looking at most of these individuals, and they're not overweight. They weren't obese at all. And it was fascinating to see sort of the foods that they do eat. And I agree, the wheat is different. The wheat, they call it like a soft wheat versus a hard wheat. Then when they look at the differential, and then genetically, the protein is different. Yeah. And the genes are different in our wheat compared to their wheat. And I have heard this over and over and over from patients that they would go to Europe and they would have bread or they would have something with wheat in it, and they don't have the effects, the GI effects, the constipation, diarrhea, abdominal pain, bloating, whatnot, from quote unquote the gluten, because the gluten is definitely different. I know. I kind of wish I.
Yeah, we order our flour now you can get on Amazon or go to Italian food market from Italy. It's a Caputo flour that's Italian, and I can make whatever my wife would like to eat with that.
Does it taste different? I should buy some. Oh.
No, it tastes the same. I mean, it tastes.
That's wonderful.
I mean, yeah, it's just to your point, it's a different
type of wheat. Yeah,
so.
I know. Interesting, isn't it?
It is very interesting and kind of, I don't know. I've got well, it's just, so kind of what I've heard is basically because of the chemicals we use here, they had to genetically modify the wheat to survive the chemicals that kill the weeds, so it doesn't kill the wheat, and that's what's added more gluten to our wheat.
No, you're right. You're right.
Find in Europe. So that's
because people would say, people have been eating food with flour for decades, centuries. Why now? Why now? And this is the exact reason.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean I haven't talked to a family on this since I've been doing this now for the last 3 or 4 months that doesn't have.
Isn't it amazing? There's a great book by called Wheat Belly. Have you heard of that one? Yeah, that's a great talking about what's happened to our production, just like what you said in terms of how our wheat has grown and the changes that have occurred. I think its last name is Davis who wrote it. Wheat Belly. But I tend to, avoid most.
I'll look that up too.
I tend to almost 100% avoid most wheat. But maybe I'll get this Caputo flour. That's what it's called.
Yeah, it's Caputo.
Okay.
There's a couple of others, but anyways, we've had good luck with Caputo. I mean, we've made bread.
Because I love making bread and homemade bread, and and if you do with fiber in it and whatnot, it's actually very healthy. But hence, depending on where the flour comes from, so I think I'm going to do
that. There you go. So. If you had the attention of the world for 5 minutes, I've gotten some very interesting answers to this question. What would you say?
I would. It goes back to what we were talking about. Is try to get back to the family dinners and sitting around the table and discussing and sitting at home and making your food from scratch and having family get involved in the cooking. And I've encouraged some families to actually have their children pick meals during the week so that they're actually involved in the process and they're not just, opening up a box of macaroni and cheese and that's like dinner for them. And also a lot of parents sometimes feed their children separate from them. Actually have your children eat the food that you're in, and you don't push it on them, but you just offer it. And it could be just a variety. The other thing is trying to, which is really hard, increase our choices of eating a variety of different vegetables. There was one oncologist who basically said she eats 21 different vegetables every week. And I said, that is so hard. And I get into the rut of the monochromatic foods of green beans, broccoli, spinach, versus creating, and it doesn't have to be a lot. It could be like a part of a grated carrot or part of a little piece of a beet. The variety is actually what provides more of the antioxidants, the phytonutrients that, in particular, these are, for chronic disease, inflammation, cancer prevention. And if we could just figure out ways to increase, this is why that smoothie you probably had this morning is great. Like when I do my smoothie, throw in a handful of spinach, then I'll throw in, I don't know, a piece of a carrot, or if I have leftover any vegetable, I'll throw it in addition to some protein, fat, and then maybe blueberries or something like that, so it tastes better. But if we can try to do this for all of our meals, because it's hard to get all your vegetables in what's needed for one meal, which is like your dinner time. So trying to incorporate and how to be creative in terms of how to get this in for other meals is, I think, critical. Was that 5 minutes? No, really.
I'll have to think about the variety. It's fine. No, I'll have to think about the variety thing because it's a Dr. Hyman shake that he published in his latest book, I think, about longevity. So, it's the same ingredients. So I guess I never thought about throwing in something that's just in the fridge. I use blueberries all the time and a lot of other stuff.
Yeah, like some days put a spinach and then put a kale and then. Try to like change and like throw in like a little beet or whatever you may have that you have available because it's not bad to. I mean, those shakes are delicious, and blueberries. I would say every day. That's a brain food, right? That's like a huge thing. It's low glycemic. It has all the other the phytonutrients that you want in there. But definitely the veggie part, I think, is the one that we need to continue to try to change up and try things you've never had. So instead of broccoli, have broccoli rabe, or have cabbage. Cabbage is delicious, and the different reds and the different color cabbages are wonderful. We have a family friend who has a chopped salad that they make every week, and they have it every day, twice a day, and it has cabbage, it has carrots, has celery, radish, like think of all these, broccoli, cauliflower, but it's chopped really small, and they just have like a half a cup or maybe 3/4 of a cup per meal. And I'm looking at that thinking that is like an anti-cancer like salad every day. And it's like it's actually really healthy. So how do we create variety? I think that's the key thing.
That's a very
I get stuck on certain, you do the same old because that's what you've done. And then you have to think outside the box. Or soups. I love making soups. And then just like that, you put the kitchen sink in there, all the veggies. So then you can get a whole group and variety. And soups are delicious, especially in the wintertime. Yeah.
They are delicious. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Oh.
All right, so recipe.
Yeah, I was thinking about this because I cook so many different meals, but I was thinking when you were kind of challenging me for a family of 4 and have it be not
under $25.
So there's this recipe that I've been doing for, oh my goodness, maybe 30 years. And when you talked about your grandmother, I'm thinking, okay, now I have to reconstruct it from what I've been doing. But basically, it's balsamic chicken, and you chop up the chicken, you marinate it in balsamic vinegar. You can put thyme in it if you want. You can put pepper on it, whatever spices you have. And so you just let it sit there. And then you have chopped tomatoes, either fresh or canned. You can get the organic, or you can get the BPA-free cans of your chopped tomatoes. And then it has roasted red peppers. So you can buy it either in a jar, or some people roast them themselves. That takes too much time. So you can chop up the roasted red peppers. So you take one big, like a Vidalia onion, you slice it, you saute it in a big kind of a stew pot. Once the onion is done, you throw in the chicken that's been marinating with the balsamic vinegar into the pot, cook the chicken, and then you add your tomatoes, and then you add the roasted red peppers, season it however you want. And then this is where the pasta comes in. So you could do like a lentil pasta, whole wheat pasta, or if you get your Italian pasta, you can cook pasta on the side. I like cooking like a penne or fusilli because that can grab some of the sauce on it better. And then based on your portion size, you would just put the chicken over it, and it is delicious. It's amazing what balsamic vinegar does. You reduce the sauce so that it becomes more of with the chicken and the balsamic, more of a glaze, and it thickens. And with the onions, it's really amazing. And it's pretty simple to make. And as long as you have, seriously, think about this. If I had my balsamic vinegar, my pasta, my tomatoes, and my roasted red peppers in my pantry, the only thing I would have to buy would be the chicken. And so you could always have that as like a standby last minute, like you don't even know what you're going to cook for dinner. And let's say you had your chicken in the freezer, you could just pull it out, defrost it, and then you can have a meal pretty quick.
So the chicken, do you leave it?
Chop it up into like
kind of like
like bite-sized pieces. Yeah, and you could either use the thigh, boneless thigh, or boneless breast. I tend to use the breast because I think it just chops up easier. But you can do whatever you have. Either one would be fine.
I've been big into thighs lately because
my goodness, I love the thighs. Okay, I'm going to tell you one other my own recipe that how I cook my chicken thighs is. Oh my goodness, I would pour cumin, pepper, and a little bit of olive oil first, and just bake it. The cumin, oh my goodness, the flavor is just divine. It's amazing. It's so simple, but it tastes on the thigh, because the thigh is fattier. So the flavor is, and then it tends to have more moisture, so it doesn't dry out either when you just bake it like that.
Oh, yeah, I could do that. Put it over rice or lentils or pasta.
And actually, that's a great idea in terms of lentils, because lentils are they're different than your other the quote unquote other peas, like your chickpeas, let's say. And I'll tell a lot of patients, just cook up a whole bunch of it, and you can either have them cold, you can put them on a salad, or like you did, heat them up and have it with your chicken, and that would be delicious. Have you ever made the little French green lentils?
I've done green. I've done red. I've made a soup out of them.
They cook up in less than 30 minutes, and they're done. Yeah. They're quick. Oh, yeah. I love lentils, too.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate you joining the podcast today, and good luck with your new ventures.
Love
Sounds
it.
Like you're keeping busy.
I can't stop. I said I think nutrition and functional medicine too much to just let it all go. And so this is like a different stage, but it's a wonderful journey. And I'm actually helping Dartmouth develop their own integrated functional medicine program. So that's really fun. And it's interesting because it's a rural hospital. So having been in a big city, like Cleveland, now coming rural, it's the same patients need the same help. So it's exciting.
I've never been to Dartmouth. I didn't realize you would consider that a rural house.
Well, the town and then the surrounding area. Yeah, it's very rural, actually.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, thank you, Ken. This has been wonderful. All right. Okay. Have a great day.
Thank you, Liz. Appreciate it.
You too.
Have a great holiday. All right. Thank you.